So we'll blow the man up and we'll blow the man down.
Blow the man down.
And we'll blow him away into Liverpool town.
Give me some time to blow the man down. Give me some time to blow the man down. Give me time. Give me time. Give me time.
All right, so Donald, what are you researching?
I'm researching the sort of beginning of the Neolithic, which is really when farming sort of becomes introduced and when people are moving from being sort of hunter-gatherers to farming communities on the west coast of Scotland, and the sort of connections that are happening between people in that area. So that's sort of my main area of research, and kind of trying to really pin down when exactly it's happening and what exactly is happening, like whether you've got kind of these big drastic sudden changes or whether it's kind of a slow gradual shift where people are adopting certain elements. And yeah, so just it's a bit of a puzzle really. That's kind of just looking into trying to work out what's happening on a regional scale. And that's kind of what I'm doing.
Why did you choose this particular research?
I'd done some research into the Neolithic before, more generally. I mean, looking at the spread from the Near East across Europe and sort of these wider patterns of cultures coming in with specific identities, and just looking at exactly what was happening. I mean, I really liked the idea that there was this puzzle of, is it native people sort of adopting elements to suit them, or are they already kind of subscribing to this cultural ideal that they're kind of adopting, or if it's the sort of incoming groups completely dominating these native groups. And I don't know, I suppose that was kind of, the puzzle of it is something that really fascinated me and really got me interested in this. It's such an interesting sort of time. I mean, it's been kind of the basis of modern sort of society begins. I mean, people are starting to settle, starting to farm, and that's when you start getting this monumentalization and these settlements are really starting to develop. And as far as the region, I mean, I've been working on sort of the west coast for the past 3 years on field work on Ardnamurchan, and I just love there. I'm from Scotland, obviously, so that was a factor. But yeah, so I mean, I really wanted to kind of try and focus this down onto a specific region rather than trying to kind of ascribe these almost kind of these broad, almost artificial sort of summaries of what the Neolithic is. That kind of, they might fit some areas, but really they don't fit others at all. So it was really just trying to kind of answer just a small piece of this puzzle, look at one specific area and try and work out what is happening here. I mean, what are people doing? Is it sort of the native groups saying, okay, this is something that's good for us, and we will adopt these certain elements that fit into our way of life, and then slowly change over time? Or is it just a sudden change of where on like they're kind of maybe some group coming in en masse and bringing everything with them, or somehow the native group just decided to kind of take on board all this stuff? I mean, it's fascinating.
Have you seen any kind of meld of cultures in the evidence?
Not yet, really. I mean, that's going to come, I think, towards the end of the project. At the moment, the main thing I've been focusing on now is sort of collecting all the dates and working out what actually sites we have dating for. I mean, that's the key issue of my work, is basically actually pinning down when these things are happening. I mean, trying to work out the early sort of markers of Neolithic. I mean, that's one of the sort of key arguments about Neolithic in Scotland in particular. I mean, it's whether or not, I mean, there's this sort of branch of Neolithic coming in from France with this distinct type of pottery and stuff that Alison Sheridan is a big proponent of, these incoming groups. And that's kind of one of the main arguments. So I've not actually sort of got to the stage of analysing the data of exactly if this is identifiable in the early Neolithic in my area, but that's something I'm definitely hoping to be able to answer towards the end of the project. So that's quite exciting. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, obviously it depends on results and whether the dates for the sites and if they're the right types of sites to be able to compare properly comes in. But I'm really just trying to identify what parts of the Neolithic are being adopted, where, and when, really. I mean, they're the main issues, and then basically from that I'll look at where exactly the placement of these sites are, if it's comparable, if you can track some sort of progress and some sort of spread, or if you can see links between sort of certain areas. If you can say, okay, there's the same thing happening here as there is just sort of across a sort of big expanse of water. I mean, just, yeah, I don't know, just trying, that's sort of analysis is probably going to happen a bit later, but I mean, hoping there should be some good questions that I can answer.
Cool. So is there, like, you mentioned earlier the example of the French bowl. Is that one of the earliest examples of like an anomaly showing up?
I think it's just one of those kind of definitive things. That was more looking at the sort of connections that are taking place and looking at the type of, that's sort of one of the first looks at sort of actually engaging with the sea and looking at these sort of maritime like connections that are looking up, and that kind of does suggest there's this kind of long distance network from going all the way from France up to the Northern Isles of Scotland, where you've got this bowl that was found, basically buried from the Neolithic. It's genetically it could only have come from France. That's been transported all the way from France up to the Northern Isles, which shows there could have potentially been sort of these long distance voyages that like taking place at this time, and it does show there would have been connections. I mean, it doesn't say that there were these big groups coming up and sort of settling, but it certainly shows us that there were potential connections from France to Scotland. So it raises some questions, but as far as, I wouldn't say it goes so far as to say that there are these income groups. It says that it shows there were contacts at least, but it's definitely interesting, and it shows, it's amazing that these sort of things can happen. It's small bits of information. I mean, just a thing as simple as a vole turning up in Orkney, which is quite incredible.
You have specific objectives that you're looking for?
My main objectives at the moment are just, I mean, it started with sort of the objective of actually trying to sort of pin down the sort of connectivity between these areas and the maritime connectivity. But the more sort of actually you got looking into this, it turned out there was been so little work done in this area. I mean, it turned out that actually a major aim of my work was bringing all these dates together and bringing all this data together and actually just having it all in one place and working out where it was. Because it turned out, I mean, there has been some past work sort of bringing some of the dates together. Ritchie has a book on the archaeology of Argyll, which has quite a few of the dates for Argyll, but obviously that doesn't extend that far north. And then there's also work by Schulting, from 2002, which brings together a few of the dates, but nothing's been done in a while, and nothing sort of specifically kind of targeting these early dates and sort of bringing them all together. So it's kind of, that's almost turned into sort of the primary aim at the moment, is kind of getting everything together, working out exactly what's happening, and working out how good our data is for this area, and trying to do a bit more work on it, trying to recalibrate some of the older dates. I'd like to, if possible, apply some sort of Bayesian statistical analysis, which kind of, essentially, it kind of brings in the radiocarbon dates, but it also brings what we know of the archaeological record to kind of balance out the dates and kind of fine-tune them and basically give us a much clearer idea of the dating for these sites. It's actually been done in the south of England by Whittle et al. They did this with a lot of the Neolithic monument sites, and they completely changed our understanding of the dating at this time. I mean, they showed that these sites come in actually a fair bit later than some of the earlier Neolithic stuff. So around about 3,700 BC compared to 4,000. So that's kind of trying to actually just fine-tune our current knowledge and provide more of a sort of solid idea of when exactly these things are happening is the main aim. But then after that, obviously, I'd like to sort of analyse exactly what is found and what I have these dates for. And then, it was sort of one of the main objectives at the start, but it's fairly secondary now. I'd probably like to remodel some of the past sea conditions slightly and see if there is a sort of correlation between spread and what's going on compared to the maritime conditions, to bring more of a maritime element to it as a maritime archaeologist, because it's all got very terrestrial, which I'm not too bothered about, but it's all interesting work. So, yeah.
Well, how many different sites are you looking at?
I don't actually have an exact number for you. I've got. It seems to be kind of growing.
You have it written down somewhere.
I could tell you how many I've got at the moment if I get to my laptop, but it's kind of one of those things that's growing more and more. I mean, as I've mentioned previously, there's not been a lot of work done in this area. I mean, they've got some people have brought together some of the dates. I'm working with the Canmore database, which is basically the Register of Historic Monuments in Scotland, and it's got a lot of the radiocarbon dates and a lot of the sites and information, but they're not on an easily searchable way. I mean, there's no way you can sort of search for specific sites from this period or from this date. You have keywords for types of sites, so it's a bit tricky trying to negotiate yourself around it and find where all this data is. Otherwise, I've been working through the discovery and excavation reports for Scotland, which are released every year, and basically outline the work that's been done, and these have radiocarbon dates at the end of them, the section of them, so that's been a valuable resource. So yeah, as far as sites go, I mean, I'm kind of just finding them as I go along, using past works, but Schulting et al. And work by Ritchie, I've mentioned previously, on the archaeology of Argyll has quite a few of the dates in it as well. But yeah, no, it's quite sad. I get far too excited when I find new radiocarbon dates and sites that haven't been mentioned before, so I'm turning into quite a nerd.
So you're headed out into the field next week?
Yeah, I'm heading out to field this weekend to a site out in Ardnamurchan on the west coast of Scotland, and there's been actually, some of the dates I'm using are from that site, from sort of Neolithic Chibard Cairn, and it's quite exciting actually. You've got this sort of cremation. We've got dates for the cremation that precede it that underlie the Neolithic chamber cairn, and then you've got the dates from the cairn itself, which kind of gives us an idea of when these practices are changing from a cremation to an inhumation that's quite monumental. So the 2 dates are quite interesting, and they're actually relatively late. They're sort of mid. The calibrated dates are about sort of mid fourth millennium BC. So it kind of suggests that in this area, this specific aspect of Neolithic is being adopted reasonably late, actually, which is quite cool, quite interesting. So it'd be nice to be able to compare them to some of the other sites, and hopefully sort of some of the other cairn sites that I've got in the area, and see how that compares, and then that might give us quite a nice idea of how these things are happening. But equally, I mean, it's a very specific type of site, and as has been found by Whittle et al., I mean, you've got aspects of the Neolithic, the monumentality, which does seem to be adopted a bit later. So being able to say that, okay, this monumentality is happening at this time doesn't necessarily tell us that there's no Neolithic activity, there's no farming going on. I mean, there quite easily could have been farming predating this, but it at least gives us an idea that we can say, okay, by this stage, there's this definite, distinct part of the Neolithic that's emerging in this area. So, yeah, that's taking me off on a tangent, but yeah, essentially I'm going on field work at the weekend, and I don't think we'll be working on any Neolithic sites, but I mean, the whole idea of this project is basically you're looking at a set of the project I'm going to be working on the weekend, is that you're looking at a set area across the whole expanse of human occupations. I mean, you've got these early Neolithic sites, there's a Viking boat barrel, there's Highland clearance era houses, so I mean, it's difficult to know year by year exactly what we're going to find and what you're going to end up working on. So if we find some Neolithic stuff, that'd be fantastic.
So what kind of challenges have you encountered so far in your research?
Challenge? I think the main challenges are just kind of the more I do, the more I kind of want to do. I mean, it just seems to be getting deeper and deeper, just further down the rabbit hole. It's just, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I started off wanting to kind of get an idea of maritime connectivity, and I was like, oh, actually, we need to bring all these dates together. All the data needs to be found, and then I find that, and it's like, well, I want to sort of recalibrate and analyze these. I want to do some basic statistical modeling, actually get these even more finely tuned and work out exactly what's happening, and then I want to just expand it and bring in the maritime aspect. So that's I suppose the main challenge is kind of trying to rein myself in and realize I only have a finite amount of time, and that's a big issue. But I suppose as far as actually getting stuff together, it's been tracking down all the dates and tracking down all the data. I mean, it's interesting. It's exciting finding this stuff and bringing it together, but it's sometimes a bit of a pain, sort of going through all these databases. And at the moment, I've got to the stage where, because I can't search for these things, I'm sort of zooming in on these maps and dragging my way across and trying to find out these specific dates and clicking on all these individual things, reading through site after site that quite a lot of time has no relevance to what I'm wanting to be looking at. So yeah, that's quite painstaking, but also exciting when you do turn over stuff. So they're probably the main issues that are hitting me.
Nice. So you've found quite a bit, it seems, that really excites you about the whole
Yeah, I found it quite a bit, yeah, but I feel like there's more and more to find, and there's I mean, the amount of stuff there are so many areas that have sites that haven't been dated as well, and there's so, I mean, I'm extending my research up to North Uist and the Western Isles, Outer Hebrides, but there's mass swathes of the northwest of Scotland that I haven't really had any work done on them at all, so I'd definitely love in the future to be able to extend my work up there, and maybe I get my own sort of primary data rather than working off stuff that's been found by other people would be the sort of the dream. So hopefully this will be successful, and I'll have the opportunity to expand on this and take it to the next step, but we shall see.
And we'll blow the man down. Blow the man down. And we'll blow him away into Liverpool town.
Give me some time to blow the man down. Give me some time to blow the man down. Give me time. Give me time. Give me time. Give me time. Give me time to blow the man down.
Yeah, I think we actually have everything.
Good, cool.
Sweet.
Good.